When we explore the relationship between Islam and Christianity, one of the most fascinating and often misunderstood areas is how the Quran speaks about Christian beliefs, figures, and history. This topic is not just theological, but also deeply human, as it connects billions of people across the world who follow the teachings of the Islam and Christianity. The Quran does not speak about Christianity in a dismissive or hostile way. Rather, it engages with it in a thoughtful, structured, and often respectful manner, acknowledging shared roots while also clarifying key differences. Understanding this perspective can help build bridges of knowledge, mutual respect, and meaningful dialogue between communities. One of the most important starting points is recognizing that the Quran refers to Christians as people of the book, a term that highlights their connection to earlier divine revelation. This designation places Christians in a unique category, distinct from those who did not receive a prophetic scripture. According to the Quran, God sent guidance throughout history through various prophets, and Christians are seen as followers of one such tradition, originally based on divine teachings given through the gospel. This recognition creates a foundation of shared spiritual heritage, linking Muslims and Christians through a lineage of prophecy that includes figures like Abraham, Moses, and most notably, Jesus Christ. The Quran speaks extensively about Jesus, known in Islam as Isa, and presents him as one of the greatest prophets ever sent to humanity. His story is told with deep reverence and care, particularly highlighting his miraculous birth. According to the Quran, Jesus was born to Mary, who is honored as one of the most righteous women in history. In fact, an entire chapter of the Quran is named after Mary, which reflects her elevated status. The narrative of Jesus' birth emphasizes divine power and mercy, describing how God created him without a father, much like the creation of Adam, thereby presenting the event as a sign of God's ability rather than a basis for divinity. As the Quran continues its account, it describes the life and mission of Jesus in a way that aligns with many elements familiar to Christians, while also offering a distinct interpretation. Jesus is said to have performed miracles, such as healing the sick and bringing the dead back to life, but always by the permission of God. This distinction is important because it reinforces a central theme in Islam, that all power ultimately belongs to God alone, and prophets are chosen servants who carry out divine will. The Quran portrays Jesus as a compassionate teacher who called people to worship one God, uphold justice, and live a life of sincerity and humility. Another important aspect of how the Quran speaks about Christianity is its acknowledgement of the original message of the gospel. The Quran affirms that the gospel was a source of guidance and light when it was first revealed, and that it contained wisdom and moral teachings meant to guide people toward righteousness. This acknowledgement creates a sense of continuity between the messages of different prophets, suggesting that at their core, they all owe to humanity toward the same essential truth: belief in one God and commitment to ethical living. However, the Quran also gently introduces the idea that over time, interpretations and understandings may have changed, leading to theological differences that are discussed with a tone of da'wah to reflection rather than confrontation. As we move deeper into the discussion, it becomes clear that the Quran does not simply present information, but invites its audience to think critically and spiritually. It often encourages dialogue with Christians in a manner that is described as best or most gracious, emphasizing wisdom, patience, and mutual respect. This approach is particularly relevant in today's world, where conversations about religion can sometimes become tense or polarized. By highlighting respectful engagement, the Quran sets a tone that prioritizes understanding over disagreement and connection over division. At the same time, the Quran also addresses certain theological concepts that differ from mainstream Christian beliefs, but it does so in a way that maintains dignity and clarity. For example, it discusses the concept of monotheism in detail, emphasizing that God is absolutely one, without partners or divisions. This concept, known as Tawhid in Islam, is presented as the central message of all prophets, including Jesus. While the Quran acknowledges that Christians hold Jesus in the highest regard, it gently clarifies that, from its perspective, Jesus himself taught the worship of one God rather than worship of himself. This distinction becomes one of the key areas where Islamic and Christian theology diverge, yet is presented in a way that encourages reflection rather than conflict. Another significant topic addressed in the Quran is the nature of Jesus' mission and his role among the children of Israel. The Quran describes him as a messenger sent to guide his people, confirm previous scriptures, and bring renewed spiritual insight. His teachings emphasize compassion, humility, and devotion, values that resonate strongly across both Islam and Christianity. By focusing on these shared principles, the Quran creates a space where followers of both religions can find common ground, even while holding different beliefs about certain aspects of theology. Throughout these discussions, one of the most striking features of the Quran's approach is its balance between affirmation and clarification. It affirms the importance of Jesus, the honor of Mary, and the value of earlier revelations, while also clarifying its own perspective on issues like divine nature and worship. This balanced tone is essential for understanding how Islam views Christianity, not as something entirely separate, but as part of a broader spiritual history that has evolved over time. This exploration is not just about theological differences, but also about understanding how two of the world's largest religions relate to each other on a deeper level. By examining how the Quran speaks about Christianity, we gain insight into a tradition that values dialogue, respects shared heritage, and encourages thoughtful reflection. It reminds us that even in areas of disagreement, there could be a foundation of mutual respect and a willingness to engage in meaningful conversation. As we continue exploring how the Quran speaks about Christianity, it becomes increasingly important to look closely at the theological conversations presented within the text. These discussions are not framed as arguments in a confrontational sense, but rather as invitations to reflect, understand, and engage thoughtfully with fundamental beliefs about God, prophethood, and the nature of faith. The Quran often presents these ideas in a calm and reasoned tone, encouraging its audience to consider both shared principles and points of divergence with sincerity and ihtiram. One of the central themes in these discussions is the concept of God's oneness, which lies at the heart of Islam. This idea, known as Tawhid, emphasizes that God is singular, unique, and without any division or sajedari. While Christianity also affirms belief in one God, the Quran addresses the Christian understanding of the Trinity, which includes the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. From the Quranic perspective, this concept is approached with careful clarification. It gently calls attention to the importance of maintaining a purely unified understanding of God, without associating any partners or taqsimatin with the divine essence. References such as chapter 4, verse 171, and chapter 5, verse 73 are often cited in this context, where the message is conveyed with a tone that invites contemplation rather than criticism. In discussing the status of Jesus Christ, the Quran offers a perspective that both honors him and defines his role in a specific way. Jesus is described as a messenger of God, a bearer of good news, and a sign for humanity. His life is portrayed with deep respect, and his teachings are seen as part of the continuous chain of prophetic guidance. However, the Quran makes a clear distinction when it comes to the idea of divinity. It emphasizes that Jesus, like other prophets, was a human being chosen by God, rather than being divine himself. This distinction is reinforced through various passages, including chapter 5, verses 72 to 75, where the focus remains on directing worship solely to God. An especially meaningful aspect of this discussion is how the Quran presents Jesus as someone who himself called people toward the worship of one God. It describes scenes where Jesus speaks about his role as a servant and messenger, reminding his followers to remain devoted to God alone. This portrayal creates a sense of continuity between the teachings of Jesus and the broader message of monotheism found throughout the Quran. For viewers and readers, This can be an opportunity to reflect on how different traditions understand the same figure in unique, yet interconnected ways. Another topic that often arises in conversations about Christianity and the Qur'an is the event commonly known as the crucifixion. The Qur'an addresses this moment in a way that differs from the mainstream narrative found in Bible. According to the Quranic account, it appeared to people that Jesus was crucified, but the reality of what happened is described differently, with the assertion that God raised him up. This perspective is mentioned in chapter 4, verses 157 to 158. The Qur'an does not go into extensive detail about the exact sequence of events, but instead places emphasis on the idea that God protected his messenger and that divine wisdom governs all. This approach leaves room for reflection while maintaining a sense of reverence for the figure of Jesus. Moving beyond theological differences, the Qur'an also highlights the ethical and spiritual qualities found among Christians. It speaks about humility, compassion, and devotion, acknowledging that many among them are sincere in their faith and close in affection to those who believe. Chapter 5, verse 82, is often referenced here, where Christians are described in a positive light due to their humility and the presence of devoted individuals, such as monks and scholars. This recognition adds an important layer to the discussion, showing that the Qur'an's engagement with Christianity is not limited to doctrinal matters, but also appreciates the lived expressions of faith. The Qur'an further encourages meaningful dialogue between Muslims and Christians, guiding believers to engage in conversations with wisdom and kindness. In chapter 29, verse 46, the instruction is given to argue in the best possible manner, focusing on common beliefs and shared values. This guidance is particularly relevant in a modern context, where interfaith dialogue plays a crucial role in promoting understanding and coexistence. By emphasizing respectful communication, the Qur'an sets a standard for how differences can be discussed without diminishing mutual respect. It is also worth noting that the Qur'an frequently returns to the idea of accountability and personal responsibility. Rather than focusing solely on labels or affiliations, it emphasizes the importance of sincere belief, righteous actions, and akhlaq. This perspective encourages individuals to look beyond identity and consider the essence of their faith and conduct. In this sense, the conversation about Christianity becomes part of a broader message about al-insaniya and the shared journey toward understanding and spiritual growth. As the narrative unfolds, it becomes clear that the Qur'an's approach is both comprehensive and nuanced. It acknowledges historical connections, engages with theological questions, and highlights ethical values, all while maintaining a tone of dignity and darotu to reflection. For a YouTube audience, this layered approach offers an opportunity to explore the topic in depth, moving beyond surface-level assumptions and into a more thoughtful and informed understanding. As we continue this journey into how the Qur'an speaks about Christianity, it becomes increasingly meaningful to explore the shared spiritual heritage that connects followers of Islam and Christianity. Beyond theological discussions, there exists a deep and rich foundation built upon common prophets, similar moral teachings, and a shared call toward living a life rooted in faith, compassion, and accountability. This dimension often receives less attention, yet plays a powerful role in understanding the relationship between these two global traditions. One of the most remarkable aspects of this shared heritage is the presence of many of the same prophetic figures in both traditions. The Qur'an frequently mentions individuals who are also central to the Bible, presenting their stories in ways that emphasize lessons of man, patience, and dedication. Figures such as Noah, Abraham, Moses, and David appear throughout the Qur'an, each representing a chapter in the ongoing story of divine guidance. These shared figures serve as a reminder that both Muslims and Christians are connected through a long and continuous narrative that stretches back thousands of years. Among all these figures, Jesus Christ holds a uniquely significant place. The Qur'an not only speaks about his life and mission, but also highlights his akhlaq and character as an example for others. He is portrayed as someone who lived with humility, showed kindness to others, and remained devoted to God despite challenges. These qualities resonate deeply with the teachings found in Christianity as well, creating a point of connection that transcends doctrinal differences. By focusing on these shared values, the Qur'an encourages believers to appreciate what unites them rather than focusing solely on what sets them apart. Another important figure that strengthens this connection is Mary. Her story is told with great respect and admiration in the Qur'an, where she is described as a symbol of purity, faith, and devotion. The recognition of Mary in both Islam and Christianity creates a unique bridge between the two traditions, as she is honored not only as the mother of Jesus, but also as a model of sincerity and trust in God. This shared reverence highlights how certain figures can serve as common ground for dialogue and understanding. When we look at the moral teachings emphasized in the Qur'an, we find many parallels with the ethical principles found in Christian teachings. Concepts such as charity, forgiveness, honesty, and care for others are central to both traditions. The Qur'an repeatedly calls upon believers to help those in need, to speak truthfully, and to act with justice and compassion. These values are not presented as abstract ideals, but as practical guidelines for living a meaningful and responsible life. In this sense, the Qur'an and the teachings of Christianity both owe to individuals to cultivate inner goodness and contribute positively to society. The idea of accountability is another shared theme that stands out. Both Islam and Christianity emphasize that human beings are responsible for their actions and will ultimately be held accountable by God. The Qur'an frequently reminds its readers of the importance of living with awareness of this responsibility, encouraging them to strive for righteousness and avoid wrongdoing. This perspective aligns closely with Christian teachings about moral responsibility and the importance of living according to divine guidance. By highlighting this common focus, the Qur'an reinforces the idea that both traditions share a deep concern for ethical living and spiritual growth. In addition to these shared teachings, the Qur'an also speaks about the importance of sincerity in worship and intention. It emphasizes that true faith is not just about outward practices, but about the condition of the heart. This emphasis on sincerity resonates with the teachings of Jesus Christ in the Bible, where he speaks about the importance of inner purity and genuine devotion. This alignment in spiritual focus provides another example of how the two traditions, despite their differences, often converge on fundamental principles of faith. The Qur'an also acknowledges that within the Christian community, there are individuals who are deeply devoted to their faith and committed to living according to its principles. It speaks of people who are humble, who engage in prayer, and who seek closeness to God with sincerity. This recognition adds depth to the Quranic perspective, showing that it does not view Christianity as a monolithic entity, but rather as a diverse community with varying levels of understanding and practice. By acknowledging this diversity, the Qur'an encourages a more nuanced and empathetic approach to interfaith relationships. As we reflect on these shared elements, it becomes clear that the relationship between Islam and Christianity is not defined solely by differences. Instead, it is shaped by a complex interplay of agreement and distinction, unity and diversity. The Qur'an's discussion of Christianity invites its audience to recognize this complexity and to approach it with an open mind and a respectful attitude. As we continue this in-depth exploration of how the Qur'an speaks about Christianity, it is essential to turn our attention toward the role of Scripture, interpretation, and the way religious understanding evolves over time. This dimension adds an important layer to the conversation, as it helps explain not only what the Qur'an says, but also why certain differences in belief exist between Islam and Christianity. Rather than approaching these differences as simple disagreements, the Qur'an presents them within a broader context of history, transmission, and human interpretation, encouraging thoughtful reflection on how divine messages are understood across generations. A key concept that appears in the Qur'an is the idea that God has sent guidance to humanity through various revelations over time. Among these is the Gospel, which is acknowledged as a source of divine guidance given to Jesus Christ. The Quran speaks of this original message as containing light, wisdom, and direction for those who followed it sincerely. This acknowledgement creates a strong connection between the Quran and earlier scriptures, including the Bible, particularly in its original form. It suggests that, at their core, these revelations were aligned in their da'wah toward belief in one God and the promotion of righteous living. At the same time, the Quran introduces the idea that over long periods, the understanding and interpretation of these messages may have undergone changes. This is not presented in a harsh or dismissive manner, but rather as a natural outcome of human involvement in the preservation and explanation of Scripture. The Quran invites its audience to consider how teachings can be interpreted differently in different contexts, and how these interpretations can shape theological perspectives over time. References such as chapter 2, verse 79, and chapter 5, verse 13 are often discussed in this context, where the focus is on the responsibility of preserving and conveying divine guidance accurately. This perspective opens the door to a broader reflection on the nature of religious texts and how they are understood within communities. In Christianity, the Bible is a collection of writings compiled over time, including the Gospels, letters, and other texts that form the foundation of Christian belief. Different denominations within Christianity may interpret these texts in various ways, leading to a diversity of theological views. The Quran acknowledges this diversity indirectly by addressing certain beliefs, while also emphasizing the importance of returning to the core message of monotheism and sincere devotion to God. Another important aspect of this discussion is the role of interpretation in shaping belief systems. The Quran often encourages its readers to think deeply, to reflect, and to seek understanding rather than simply accepting ideas without question. This emphasis on reflection is particularly relevant when discussing complex theological concepts, such as the nature of God or the role of prophets. By da'wah to its audience to engage with these ideas thoughtfully, the Quran promotes an approach to faith that is both uplifting and spiritually grounded. In addition to addressing scripture and interpretation, the Quran also highlights the importance of intention and sincerity when engaging with religious teachings. It suggests that true understanding is not only a matter of intellectual analysis, but also of openness and humility. This perspective resonates across both Islam and Christianity, where sincerity of heart is considered a key element of genuine faith. By focusing on this shared value, the Quran creates another point of connection between the two traditions, reminding believers that the pursuit of truth is as much a spiritual journey as it is an intellectual one. The discussion of evolving understanding also brings attention to the historical context in which religious communities develop. Over centuries, social, cultural, and linguistic factors can influence how teachings are interpreted and practiced. The Quran's engagement with Christianity can be seen, in part, as a response to the beliefs and practices present at the time of its revelation. By addressing these perspectives, it contributes to an ongoing dialogue about the nature of faith and the interpretation of divine guidance. For a modern audience, this historical dimension provides valuable insight into how religious ideas have developed and how they continue to shape the world today. It is also important to recognize that the Quran's approach is not solely focused on critique or correction. Instead, it seeks to devote people back to what it presents as the original essence of divine teaching: the worship of one God, the mursah of justice, and the cultivation of akhlaq. This da'wah is extended not only to Christians, but to all of humanity, emphasizing the universal nature of its message. In this sense, the discussion of Christianity becomes part of a broader da'wah to reflect on one's own beliefs and to seek a deeper connection with God. As we look at the bigger picture, the Quran's treatment of Christianity can be understood as part of a larger framework that values continuity, reflection, and sincerity. It acknowledges the existence of earlier revelations, engages with their interpretations, and invites its audience to consider how these teachings relate to its own message. This approach creates a dynamic and thoughtful conversation that goes beyond simple agreement or disagreement. encouraging a deeper exploration of faith and understanding. As we move further in this exploration of how the Quran speaks about Christianity, it becomes especially meaningful to consider how these teachings apply in today's world. In an age defined by global connection, cultural exchange, and constant communication, the relationship between followers of Islam and Christianity is more visible and impactful than ever before. The Quran's approach, which combines clarity with respect, offers valuable guidance for navigating these interactions in a way that promotes understanding, coexistence, and meaningful dialogue. One of the most important lessons that can be drawn from the Quran is the emphasis on respectful communication. It consistently encourages believers to engage with others in a manner that reflects wisdom, patience, and kindness. This principle is particularly relevant when discussing religious differences, as it sets a tone that prioritizes understanding over debate. In a world where conversations can quickly become polarized, this approach provides a reminder that meaningful dialogue begins with listening, empathy, and a genuine desire to understand the perspective of others. The Quran also highlights the importance of focusing on shared values as a starting point for interaction. As discussed in earlier parts, both Islam and Christianity emphasize principles such as compassion, charity, honesty, and accountability. These shared akhlaq can serve as a foundation for a tarawunu between communities, allowing people of different faiths to work together toward common goals such as social justice, humanitarian efforts, and community development. By emphasizing what unites rather than what divides, the Quran encourages a more constructive and forward-looking approach to interfaith relationships. Another significant aspect of the Quran's message is its recognition of diversity as part of the human experience. It acknowledges that people will have different beliefs and perspectives, and it presents this diversity not as a problem to be eliminated, but as a reality to be understood. This perspective encourages tolerance and coexistence, reminding believers that ikhtilaf in belief does not have to lead to conflict. Instead, it can become an opportunity for learning, growth, and deeper understanding. In the context of modern society, this message carries profound relevance. With the rise of digital platforms, including YouTube, conversations about religion reach wider audiences than ever before. This creates both opportunities and challenges. On one hand, there is the potential to educate, inspire, and build bridges between communities. On the other hand, there is the risk of understanding or oversimplification. By drawing on the Quran's balanced approach, content creators can contribute to more thoughtful and respectful discussions, presenting information in a way that is both accurate and engaging. The portrayal of Jesus Christ in the Quran also plays an important role in fostering interfaith understanding. As a figure deeply respected in both Islam and Christianity, Jesus serves as uqtatan ittisalan between the two traditions. By highlighting the qualities attributed to him in the Quran, such as compassion, humility, and devotion to God, it becomes possible to create a shared space of appreciation that resonates with audiences from different backgrounds. This shared reverence can act as a bridge, encouraging dialogue that is rooted in mutual respect. Similarly, the iftarun shown toward Mary provides another example of common ground. Her story, honored in both traditions, reflects values of faith, trust, and perseverance. By bringing attention to such shared figures, the conversation can shift from one of division to one of connection, highlighting the il-insaniya that underlies both religious narratives. The Quran's emphasis on sincerity and personal responsibility also offers guidance for individuals navigating their own beliefs in a diverse world. It encourages people to approach faith with honesty and reflection, to seek knowledge, and to act with integrity. These principles are not limited to any one community, but are universally applicable, making them especially relevant in a global context where people of different backgrounds interact on a daily basis. At the same time, the Quran does not shy away from presenting its own perspective clearly. It maintains its theological positions while still to respectful engagement with others. This balance between conviction and openness is an important lesson for modern audiences. It demonstrates that it is possible to hold firm beliefs while also respecting the beliefs of others, creating space for dialogue that is both honest and constructive. As we reflect on these ideas, it becomes clear that the Quran's discussion of Christianity is not only about theology, but also about how people relate to one another. It offers a framework for interaction that is rooted in dignity, understanding, and a shared commitment to akhlaq. For viewers on platforms like YouTube, this perspective can be both enlightening and inspiring, providing a model for how complex topics can be approached with care and thoughtfulness. In many ways, the message of the Quran encourages us to move beyond simple labels and to engage with one another on a deeper level. It owes to us to recognize the common threads that connect humanity, while also appreciating the diversity that makes each tradition unique. By embracing this approach, it becomes possible to build relationships that are not defined by ikhtilaf, but enriched by it. As we reach the conclusion of this in-depth exploration of how the Quran speaks about Christianity, it is important to take a step back and reflect on the broader picture that has emerged throughout this discussion. What we find is not a simple narrative of agreement or disagreement, but a thoughtful and layered engagement that combines respect, clarity, and indahatu to deeper understanding. This balanced approach offers valuable insights, not only into theology, but also into how people of different faiths can interact with one another in a meaningful and constructive way. Throughout the Quran, Christianity is addressed as part of a shared spiritual history that connects humanity through a silsila of divine messages. By recognizing Christians as people of the book, the Quran acknowledges their connection to earlier revelation and places them within a larger framework of faith that includes prophets such as Abraham, Moses, and Jesus Christ. This recognition establishes a foundation of Vushtara heritage, reminding us that despite differences, there are deep roots that link these traditions together. At the heart of the Quran's message is a strong emphasis on the oneness of God, a concept that shapes its perspective on all theological matters. While it honors Jesus Christ as a prophet of great significance and respects Mary as a model of faith and devotion, it also clarifies its position on issues such as divinity and worship. These clarifications are presented not in a harsh or dismissive tone, but as part of a darotu to reflect on the nature of faith and the essence of divine guidance. One of the most meaningful takeaways from this discussion is the Quran's consistent emphasis on akhlaq and sincere belief. It reminds its audience that true faith is not defined solely by labels or affiliations, but by the sincerity of one's qalb and the righteousness of one's actions. This perspective creates a space where individuals are encouraged to look beyond surface-level differences and focus on the deeper principles that guide their lives. In doing so, it highlights a shared commitment across both Islam and Christianity to live with integrity, compassion, and a sense of responsibility. The Quran also offers a powerful model for dialogue, to believers to engage with others in a way that reflects wisdom, patience, and respect. This approach is especially important in today's interconnected world, where interactions between different communities are more frequent and visible than ever before. By encouraging conversations that are thoughtful and respectful, the Quran provides guidance on how to navigate differences without allowing them to become sources of conflict. Another key insight is the importance of understanding the role of interpretation and history in shaping religious beliefs. As discussed earlier, the Quran acknowledges earlier revelations while also inviting reflection on how these messages have been understood over time. This perspective encourages a more nuanced view of religious traditions, one that recognizes both their shared origins and their unique developments. For modern audiences, this understanding can lead to greater appreciation of the complexity and richness of different faiths. In the context of creating content for platforms like YouTube, these insights offer a valuable opportunity to present a narrative that is both informative and engaging. By focusing on clarity, respect, and depth, it becomes possible to create content that resonates with a wide audience while also encouraging meaningful reflection. The goal is not simply to present information, but to inspire viewers to think, to learn, and to approach complex topics with an open mind. As we bring everything together, it becomes clear that the Quran's discussion of Christianity is part of a broader da'wah to humanity. It calls people to recognize the unity of God, to live with akhlaq, and to engage with one another in ways that promote understanding and harmony. At the same time, it acknowledges the reality of differences and provides a framework for addressing them with dignity and thoughtfulness. For viewers, the ultimate takeaway is one of balance. It is possible to appreciate shared values while also understanding distinct beliefs. It is possible to engage in meaningful dialogue without losing one's own perspective. And most importantly, it is possible to build connections that are rooted in respect, knowledge, and a genuine desire to understand one another. In a world that often highlights division, this message carries a quiet but powerful significance. It reminds us that even when beliefs differ, there's always an opportunity to find common ground, to learn from one another, and to grow in our understanding of both faith and humanity. By approaching these conversations with sincerity and care, we can contribute to a more thoughtful and connected world.